So I just want to make a video about my substitute today. Um, my original teacher got into a car accident about 3 weeks ago and is having difficulties with her eye. So her doctor suggested that she take another week off. So the main day teacher was teaching today. Mind you, that she's freaking hilarious. Is the funniest thing in the world. And I don't mean to make fun of her. It was just so funny that I had to share. Okay, so her name is Miss St. John. She sits down, and we have a abbreviations test. And I go to school for medical billing, so we have a lot of abbreviations to memorize. So she was like, "So what are we doing today, class?" And then I was like trying so hard for everybody to be quiet so we don't have to take the stupid test. So I didn't study for it. And so she's like going through her schedule and she's like, well, I see we have to go over chapter 16 and chapter 7. So, oh, and we have an abbreviation test. Great. So, she was like, so why don't you guys study for 15 minutes and then we'll start taking the test. And so I'm like, okay, 15 minutes, I can study, whatever. So we're going and looking at our little books or whatever. I flip to the page and I study for 15 minutes and I'm like, okay, like, dude, this fucking sucks. And then our substitute in St. John was like, so it's supposed to be online, but I don't know the link, so we're just gonna figure this thing out. And so she was like, what are the abbreviations? So we tell her the page of the book to go to, and she's like, act like this is a book. She goes to the page and she's like, are you flipping serious? These are your words? She's like, that's ridiculous. We're not doing that. And then, so she's like, you don't need to know all these. So she picks out the ones that we need to know, and she's like, does anybody want to write these on the whiteboard? And of course, my class is so fucking lazy that nobody's offering to do it for her, and everybody's just sitting there, and I'm just like, oh my god, fine, I'll do it, or whatever. So I take the marker, and I'm like writing on, and I'm like super short, I'm 5 foot, and I'm like writing it like this, and then, so we do our quiz, and then we have to write the abbreviations, and then she goes, define the abbreviations and what the word of the abbreviation means. That wasn't part of the test. Like, we didn't study that. So we have to make up bullshit definitions. And we're doing that. And then, so she, like, picks them up or whatever. And then, she lets us go on our break. And so, she's like, and it's a 10-minute break. So it's 7:50, we're on our break, and everybody comes back in our class, like, 8:05. And we all sit down and we're just like, okay, waiting for Miss St. John to come back, you know. Okay, 20 minutes later, she doesn't come back. 30 minutes later, she doesn't come back. And one of the girls that's in my class, she walked out to the parking lot to go see if she was alright because I guess earlier she like tripped and fell flat on her face. Like, no joke. Flat on her face. So they go check up on her and they like have 2 more people go with them, and I'm just like looking at them like, what the hell? Like, where are they going? I want to go. Like, I want to go home. And so they go out to the parking lot, and they come back inside, and they're like laughing. And I'm like, what's so funny? Where'd you guys go? And she's like, Missing John is sleeping in her car. And I was like, are you serious? They're like, yeah, we knocked on the door, on the window, to ask if she was alright. And she like woke up and was like, yeah, everything's good, everything's good. And they're like, okay. And so they come back and sit down. Another 20 minutes go by. And it's our second break. And so we take our second break, and that's a 20-minute break. And she's still out there sleeping because she went back to sleep after they asked her if she was alright. And so they're out there. And she finally comes inside. And because I think, no, yeah, Patrice, one of the girls, she woke her up and was like, if you want, we can go home like early because all we're doing is reading chapters. And I guess she said no. So she came back inside, and she starts going over the chapter, or trying to, and she's like trying to figure out the what's it called, projector. She can't figure that out, and she's like, this isn't working, so we're just gonna do something else. And so she's like going over the chapter, and she's just like acting like we're so fucking stupid. But I don't think she did this on purpose. I think she was just like trying to talk. But she's like, okay, now we're gonna go over ICD-9s and CPTs, which is ICD-9s are diagnosis codes in a doctor's office, and CPTs are procedure codes in a doctor's office. And so she's like, okay, everybody, to learn this, we have to get books. And so she goes back to the cabinet, and she's like, okay, everybody get in line to get a book. And so let's just say this is the CPT book, and this is the ICD-9 book. And they're like 10 times bigger than this. They weigh so much. But, and she's a bigger girl, or woman. She, she starts walking down the hallway to teach us about this. And she's like, she's like walking, and then she drops it. She like drops the book, like she completely trips and drops the book. And I'm just like, oh my god, this is like so ridiculous. Like our teacher is so crazy right now. But and then she continues to talk or whatever, and then she goes back to sit down because she's like, I don't really like, she didn't really feel like teaching us the chapter. She's like, why don't you guys just do the questions for the chapter? And then so she's sitting down at her desk, which is in the back of the classroom, and she goes, guys, it's like really cold in here. And we're like, yeah, it's always cold in here. She goes, oh my gosh, it was cold. Like 5 times, I promise you. She's like, it is so flippin' cold. Oh my gosh, it's cold. It is really freaking cold. And we're just like, yeah. And she's like, who else is cold? Come on, tell me, who else is cold? And we're just like, yeah, it's cold. So she goes over to the next question and she turns down the air. So she comes back in and she sits down at her desk and we're like doing the back of the questions or whatever. And this is her. I look back there and this is what she's doing at her desk. And I'm like, is she really snoring in class? So, this other girl, Passion, she has, I have to mention this, her hair is cut right here, and the other side of her hair is cut right here. I don't know why. And she's like, so ghetto. And she's like, hey, excuse me, excuse me. And she goes, what's her name? And she looks at me, and I'm like, Miss St. John. And she's like, Miss St. John. And she's like sleeping still. And she's like, huh, huh? And she was like, Passion asks her, do we have to do the whole chapter? And she was like, yeah, do the whole chapter, do the whole chapter. And that was my entire class. And then we got to go home. How freaking ridiculous is that? That was my sub.